It's already recording, so
okay.
there is no clapper. So yeah, welcome back to the polyTECH podcast. It's been a minute since we've been back on, and I'm honoured to have Sam Tuineau from KiwiRail at the moment. But I'll let him jump into it and give us a bit of background. I guess we'll start where you are now, but I really want to understand, who Sam is, and I guess share a bit about where we met. But I guess General Manager ICT at KiwiRail now.
Yes. So I've been there now for since beginning of January. Obviously, I was at Auckland Transport with a lovely group over there and yourself, and that's where we met. But before we get into that, maybe just a little bit about myself. So my heritage is Tongan. My dad's a Tongan boy, and my mum's a Kiwi girl. And they met in Tonga when my mum was over there doing VC work. And there was this island guy that kept hanging around. He was going into the ministry back then, and he didn't speak a word of English, and she didn't speak any Tongan. But it was a pretty cool love story. And then from that, fast forward to when I was born. I was actually born here in New Zealand at St. John's, and it was when my dad. As he was getting into the ministry, that's where he was doing his training in St. John's, and my mum gave birth to me there. One of three brothers. My older brother was born in Tonga, and he's currently in Spain at the moment. And my younger brother, who was born in Fiji, is currently in France playing rugby there. He's still living the good life. When I was younger, my dad got stationed after I was born here in New Zealand. Got stationed in Fiji to spread the word and build churches and schools and water tanks and so forth. And that's where I grew up. So I spent just under 13 years in Fiji through my, young teenage years. And I absolutely loved it. And it's one of those things that you don't really understand until you've lost it or you move away from it. I really, really look back at that time and I think, man, I had such a privileged lifestyle. In Fiji with other expat New Zealanders and Australians, living a life that I now look back and I think about what my children have now compared to what we have back then. And I'm sure everyone does that, right? Everyone's like, you don't remember the good old days. But one thing that it did teach me in Fiji is how to be humble, and how to work hard, how to respect your elders, and I'm sure it's like that in most cultures. But in Fiji, with my dad being who he was and being very well respected in the villages, it really showed that when you walked into a room where there were elders, you always bowed your head and you chilo as you walk past, and that was something that I've always had in my life since today. Yeah, so always respect my elders, always respect my managers and that sort of stuff as well, right? And my peers. But I think one other thing that it also did for me is it made me appreciate the simpler things in life. You look back and you say, we didn't have a lot of money. My dad being a minister and my mum being in education. We didn't have a lot of money, but we seemed to have a lot of fun, right? We were stationed near a village, and just outside of Suva, Nasinu, and every day I would be down at the village, swimming and playing with the kids and just having a good old time. And we had nothing, right? The villages have got nothing.
So you went to school with the local kids?
I went to school at Viuto Primary, and that was predominantly
Shout out to you too.
yeah. Shout out to Vito. And then I went to Suva Grammar. And from Suva Grammar, I then went to International. And it's when I went to International that I started to meet a lot of the sort of expat kids from Australian Commission and New Zealand Commission families and, that sort of stuff.
Wow, so it's just
And that was a step up, right? These guys, the commissioners that were there had a lot of money. They lived in the nice part of town. So I really enjoyed hanging out with them, going on their boats and surfing. Yeah, that's right. And my dad had a motorbike, a little Suzuki 185, and that's when I started to learn how to ride motorbikes.
Oh, wow.
So I used to take my dad's motorbike and ride out to my friend's place and stay the night there or stay the weekend there. So, yeah, that's a little bit about myself. Coming to New Zealand after 13 years now in the Anglican ministry, you were supposed to stay 7 years in a location, and then they would move you to another location.
Oh, okay.
And then,
So had he done time in New Zealand before he went to Fiji?
Yeah, so he did his college time here in New Zealand, and that's why I was born here. And then he was stationed in Fiji, but he had done stuff in Solomon Islands and Tonga and so forth. So 7 years in Fiji, 8th year came along, and they said, you're doing such a good job, just one more year. 9, 10, 11, 12. And then he was like, right, that's it. We're done. We're going back to New Zealand. And I think one of the things that I sort of regret is my dad was trying to learn English more than he was trying to teach us Tongan. And because we were in Fiji, it was either Fijian or English. So unfortunately, I learnt more Fijian than I did of Tongan. And coming to New Zealand, where the Tongan population is like, it's massive. All the Tongans that I would meet, they would start talking in Tongan, and I'd be like, oh man, I can't talk Tongan, So I felt like a sort of second-rate Tongan, because I couldn't speak the language. My older brother could speak a little bit more Tongan than I could. But the trip to New Zealand was my dad said, look, that's it. We're coming back to New Zealand.
So how old are you now?
So I'm now 48.
No, sorry, we're coming back to New Zealand.
Sorry. Oops, can we erase that?
Edit that out.
So I was just going on 14. Going on 14, 15. And what had happened was, as I was in Fiji, I got into Wakaama. And so we were having competitions in Fiji. We had a bit of a World Cup in Fiji, and the team did really well. And then we kept the team going. And as my parents came back to New Zealand, they came back into Auckland. And my older brother had gone down to Christchurch a couple of years or a few years earlier and did boarding school down in Christchurch at Christ College. And he had got a scholarship to go there because it's an Anglican school. And my dad was able to get him a scholarship to go there. So I stayed in Fiji for probably another 6 months while my parents moved to Auckland, and I trained with the Wakaama team because the Worlds were being held in New Zealand in that year, the next year. So I stayed in Fiji. I stayed with my best friend Todd Bauer, and then we came over as a team and competed in New Zealand for the Wakaama. And then after that, I went down to Christchurch and did 2 years in boarding school down at Christ College.
Down in Christ College as well.
Yeah. And Christ College, it was myself and maybe one or two others. Tabai Matson, he was in the All Blacks, was with me. He was he's Fijian heritage as well. So we got along well. But he also knew my older brother because he had gone to college at a very early age. And so he knew my brother. Yeah. So there was a good connection there. Still try to stay in touch with him every now and then. And then I came up to Auckland. Got my first job at the airport, working for Ogden Aviation. And I think that experience of being in the islands, respecting my elders, appreciating relationships and so forth. Ogden Aviation was a new organization to New Zealand. They'd come in to take over looking after United Airlines. So United Airlines outsourced their servicing, baggage handling, all that sort of stuff in New Zealand.
Okay.
And Ogden's came in and took over that contract. So it was a brand new organization, and they were looking for people to do baggage handling, clean the planes, and all that sort of stuff. And I landed, my first job was the supervisor of a group of cleaners that were cleaning the aircraft, United Airlines. And this group of cleaners were filled with Maori ladies, Samoan ladies, Tongan ladies, and we just had so much fun. They took me under their arm.
Just all older than you?
Just all older than me, right? It was like my first job, like I was, 17, 18. And it was my first job, and these ladies would give me grief, but they looked after me, right? It was like, so I was like, right, we're going to do this. And they're like, hey, Sam, sit down, man. What are you talking about? I was like, oh, no. Trying to be the big man, just getting shot down. But it was awesome because it was like a family, right?
Yeah.
It was like it was just different from the Pālanga or the Pākehā, where these guys would come together, they'd bring their lunches together, they'd sit down, and share their lunch and stuff like that. Sam, come over here, come and have something to eat, And it sort of reminded me of the islands right back in Fiji when you walked past the house that was having a dinner. They would say, hey, mai kana, come in and have something to eat, even if they didn't know you. Hey, come in. So it sort of felt like that. So it felt like home. So that was pretty awesome. And then, I sort of progressed, got a job in cargo, and then progressed into IT from cargo. And that was another part of my journey as well, was I sort of fell into the roles that I was doing, right? I needed a job. I went to stay up in Auckland with Mum. Mum was like, you need to get a job. I'm not looking after you. Get your lazy ass out there. And I was like, man, I don't even know what to do, right? So college for me was very much enjoying college than it was getting an education, right? I knew I had to learn some stuff and try and do well in my studies and stuff like that. But I loved boarding school. I was a bit mischievous, I snuck out at night, that sort of thing. So coming out of college, even though I had Christ College on my CV, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just was thinking, all right, I just got to go and get a job. So that's why when this thing came up, I applied for it. It was my second job that I applied for. The first one was for a job in a warehouse in Onehunga, and I went there the first day, and I walked in and I was like, what am I doing, right? And then this other job came up. I didn't go back to the other job. I just called them and said, sorry, I'm not coming back, right? I was like, this warehouse. Anyway, but progressing from...
The world's my oyster. I'm giving up the warehouse. Going to go clean.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to go clean.
I've got this plan in my head.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting because when I was getting the training from these guys that came from America, because Ogden Aviation was an American company. These guys were like, Sam, you're showing some really good leadership here. You can do really well. And I was thinking to myself, oh, wow, I just get along well with the ladies, right? Yeah. Not in that way. But like, they put us through some scenarios and stuff like that. And I was able to get these guys to work together and, right, this is the plan. This is what we're going to be doing. Just like you do as a rugby team,
Yeah.
And I think that's why the team were like, you do quite well, getting the team together.
Yeah.
So that's probably why I got that supervisory job. But anyway, fast forward into cargo. I got a couple of roles, first with United Cargo and then with LEP International, which was a cargo company up in, I forget the name of the place, but up by the airport, just past the airport, George Bolt Drive, out that way, where all the industrial places were. So I got a job as a runner. What do they call themselves? God, it was so long ago. Customs runner.
So you've got a lot of runners around.
you got a lot of runners around here. Yeah. So and that was pretty cool as well. So I was given a car that I could drive around.
That's always
at 19-year-old,
you've made it at 19
I was like,
when...
yeah, sweet. So I had this car, and I used to run the customs documents from the office down to customs, get them all stamped, and then run them back so that they could export.
So what's this, like 90s, like early 90s?
So this would have been, early 90s.
And that's just official that's why they had to do it manual?
Yes, yeah. All the official documents, all the way bills, all the house bills, all the customs documents and all that sort of stuff. So you had to get them all stamped. Back then, everything was pretty manual. And at that stage, I was also playing a little bit of rugby. Yeah. And I was playing for Ponsonby under 21s because my older brother had played for Ponsonby as well. Yeah. And so that a little bit far to go, but still it was,
whereabouts in Auckland were you guys based?
So we were in Mangaroo Bridge.
Okay, yeah.
So close to the airport, hence the reason why I got this sort of job out there. It was nice and close. So I was playing rugby, enjoying myself. I had a job as a customs runner, and then I progressed into perishables. So there was a job that came up in LEP Perishables, exporting lobsters and crayfish and melons and all that sort of stuff, tuna and stuff like that. And that's when I started getting into the serious, right? This is something that you need to focus on. It's not just something that gets you money, but something that you can sort of build a career on. Yeah. And so I did that role for a while, and then that organisation got bought by Mainfreight. Okay. Yeah. And that was when I met Gary Collins, who was the CIO for Mainfreight. Yeah. But before that had happened, I'd moved from perishables across into dry freight, and that was the sort of catalyst to move me into IT. And it seems bizarre, but I was doing export air freight. And one of the things that happens in export air freight, or back then anyway, was that on Friday nights you would work to, 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, getting everything prepared for the weekend. Yeah. And then because you were working so late in the night, what was happening was the IT guy was coming in and I'd see the IT guy come in, and he would come into the building and he would change the backup tapes, and he would sort out issues and stuff like that. Yeah. By this stage, I'd had a little bit of interest from college around computers. And at that stage, I was thinking to myself, there's a little bit of money in IT, right? You hear all the stories, a little bit of money in IT. So as this guy would come in, I befriended him, and I said, you need a hand with any of that sort of stuff? Yeah, I did a bit of computer stuff at school, I helped the guys around here with computer stuff and that sort of stuff.
Push the button to turn it on.
Yeah, that's right. But at that stage, I was also helping, and this is probably just my interest in computers and how computers worked and so forth. I found myself helping out the guys when they had issues with their computer issues around the place, right? Yeah. But what was supposed to happen was, as they had issues with the computer stuff, they should have called the computer guy, and he would come in. Yeah. But what was happening, they was just coming to me and saying, hey, look, can you help out? And I was like, no worries, I'll give you a hand with that. So when this guy used to come in and change the tapes, I befriended him, and I said, I can do that for you. If you want, just give me a call when it's ready and I'll do that. Yeah. So, and that was the start, right? So I started doing little jobs for him. I started doing this and that and this and that. And then he resigned.
Okay. Yeah.
And when he resigned, But actually, before he resigned, I decided I'd like to get into computer industry, or as a career in computer. So I put myself through training. It was back then. It was Inti for MCSE training at New Horizons in town. So I put myself through that, and it was good timing because as I finished
the top of Cobra Pass.
That's it.
That's one.
Yeah. Just as I'd finished that, he resigned. And the company was like, hey, you want to do some of this? I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. I'll be the computer guy. But I was still doing my job as
the dry goods
as the dry goods operator. So I was sort of doing two roles there. And at that stage, Main Freight came in and purchased LEP International. And we were like, oh hell, we're going to lose our jobs, right? These Main Freights come in, they purchased us, and Main Freight already had another little organisation that they had purchased, which was Main Freight International, and that was doing the same thing we were doing, right? Yeah. So we were like, oh, I can see what's going to happen here. Our jobs are just going to disappear into that organisation. And at that point, the CIO, Gary Collins from Main Freight, came to LEP International, and if you know Gary Collins, he's pretty bolshy, he's a pretty bolshy kind of guy. He came in and goes, right, who's the computer guy here? And I was like, me. He says, all right, I'm going to be coming back next week. We'll have a catch up. I'm thinking, oh yeah, here we go. He came up and he said, right, I hear you, the computer guy here. He didn't ask me anything about my experience or anything like that. He says, do you want to come and work for me? I was like, yeah, man, I'll come and work for you. He said, right, but you'll have to be based out
on a good packet here, I don't know.
I did do that. I did say, you get paid pretty well here. But it was the first time when I went to Main Freight, because with Main Freight I also got a company car as well, because they wanted me to look after LEP International from a support perspective, and also look after a couple of other smaller companies that they had. But it was the first time that I had this pay jump. That just blew my mind, right? Because I think I was probably on something like 43,000 or something or other, and it went from 43,000 to 60 something, 61 or something. And I was like, whoa! And I got a company car as well. And I was like, man, this is awesome. So I went to work for Main Freight, and same thing there. I think Gary Collins was brought up in South Auckland, so he wasn't your typical IT geek, I suppose, right? He liked IT, but he was very much a people person as well, and so I got along really well with him.
Okay.
He would say, "Hey Sam, can you have a look at this?" And because of where I was brought up, I'd be like, "Yep, no worries, man. I'll do that for you. Yeah, sweet. Yeah, okay. Respect. And so we got along really well, and that so at Main Freight I spent 10 years at Main Freight, doing various roles within ICT. Myself, Gary, and a few other people within Main Freight did a whole lot of work around looking at splitting off companies or bringing in companies and so forth. And that gave us a lot of experience around how do we integrate systems or split systems up to make sure that we can, split them off and so forth. And Main Freight was also an organisation, really the only organisation I know that had a governance model that said, if it's a good idea, go and do it. Right, not like what we were used to at Auckland Transport, which was right. Where's the document for this? Where's that? Where's the committee for this? Where's the, So it was one end of a spectrum around how you run an organisation versus the highly regulated sort of compliance that you get with local government, SOE, and that sort of stuff. So it was a really, really good eye opener.
Yeah, of just getting it done, kind of.
Yeah, just, they've got this thing where, and I don't know whether it's still like that now, but it's like, if that's a good idea, if you can talk to that, if you can make sure that, you deliver on that, go for it.
Yeah.
We're going to give you enough rope, go for it. Which was excellent back in the day. Yeah. And plus you could drink on site as well.
Well, that always helps.
So Friday, the trolley would the boardroom, where we worked was at the other end of the ICT office.
Yeah.
So every Friday, everyone would just trance through, IT to get to the boardroom where everyone would sit down and have a few beers and all that sort of stuff.
So, together with everyone from Mainfreight?
We were based in the Daily Freight building.
Yeah.
But yeah, everyone would just come through, on a Friday and have a few drinks and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it was a good old days.
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Love those days. Love those days.
Now, 10 years we were there, would have been much change in, I guess, technology, just the changing in chopping? But
yeah, there's, technology changes so fast. So much happens. There's just so much to take in. Everyone knows you can focus in a certain area like networks, or focus in server, or focus on development, software, services. There is so much to it that I think so I'm not a master of anything, and I think looking back now and looking at where I am now, we had an executive one-day thing yesterday. And as we were going around the floor after this thing we had yesterday, everyone was we were asked to present ourselves and what we do and what we want to get out of the workshop. And when it came to myself, I sort of said, well, my job is actually working with people. Yeah. Technology is just the area that I do it in, but it's actually working with people, right? And I've looked back over my years and I've thought to myself, I've had some very, very smart people on my teams. I've had some very, very smart people that I wouldn't want on my teams because they weren't part of a team, right? They were very much that sort of individual that was all about themselves, regardless of what the technology was. So I look back over my time, and I think my heritage, where I grew up, had a massive part of how successful I am, and it's not because of my knowledge of IT or technology. It's my knowledge of, without knowing it, my knowledge of how I work with people. How I build teams, how I build that sort of culture around what we are doing. We just happen to work in technology.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess is that how you stay relevant now?
Yeah, I think so, right? I think if someone said, how do you stay relevant in a technology sense? I'll be like, man, I am so far behind some of these kids that are coming out of uni and coming out of the woodwork. And you're right, it's how I stay relevant, right? Because the people are the same, right? It's a person that you need to work with. The better you can give them the tools that make them effective and make them effective as part of a team, it doesn't matter what you're working on, right? And now, my role's changed a little bit more. I'm more in the sort of, governance and more in the sort of commercial areas and contracts and all that sort of stuff, with a smattering of just keeping abreast of what's happening in the industry. So I do like to try and do forums where I can sort of sit with my peers, understanding sort of emerging technologies, understanding how people are using those technologies. But that's how I stay relevant.
In those leadership roles, especially like where you sit with KiwiRail, how much sway do you get in terms of those decisions around where we move now, or where the business goes next to kind of make the most of their technology decisions?
Yeah, good question. So I had from Mainfreight, I had moved. Actually, let me go back to how I got to KiwiRail. as I was working with Main Freight, Gary Collins, the CIO, left Main Freight, and I think it was probably about a year later, he called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to come and work for me?" I said, "Oh, hell, yeah, why not? What have you got to offer?"
A really good ticket, right?
That's right. I get a car here, right? And it was a Nissan Primera back in the day. But after those sort of negotiations, I left Main Freight and went to work for Gary Collins at TransLink.
Okay, TransLink.
And that organisation sort of morphed and morphed until it became KiwiRail.
Because I saw that on the site, that I just always assumed KiwiRail was just all the rail. But then I saw the Inter-Islanders on your side and all that.
Yeah. So it went... how did it go? I think it went into toll. No, it was before toll. For some reason it was NZRC, New Zealand Rail Corporation, and I can't remember exactly how it happened, but I followed Gary into rail. It then got purchased by toll. Then it got purchased by the Crown, or it got purchased back by the Crown, and then it then became KiwiRail. And through that process, Gary had left sometime. I think it was when Toll had purchased the organisation. Gary had left the organisation. I stayed with the organisation till it became KiwiRail, and that journey was 13 years.
Oh wow!
With KiwiRail.
Yeah.
In KiwiRail,
everyone's doing the maths. Like, man, this guy You sure he was 17 or 7 when he started working?
That's right. I think I feel like I'm about 70 something now, but it was that when I left KiwiRail, it had no money. It was really looking at how do we save ourselves. How do we look at outsourcing as much as possible, and just focus on our core services? And so it was the CIO and the CFO back then that decided to outsource ICT.
Okay.
And so I sort of said, right, cool. Well, it took us just under a year to outsource everything to Spark.
Oh. Wow.
And I think the only thing that KiwiRail held on to was the application support teams and one other that escapes me at the moment. Mm-hmm. But what I did is after the 9 months that it took to outsource the majority of ICT, I left. And that's when I came to Auckland Transport.
Okay.
And that was just another step up. I got there in 2016, and then from about 2018, we really ramped up getting Auckland Transport or business technology to where it is today. I think myself, Chris Crichton, we got along really well. It was a good team. We had Roger Jones there. He was really paving the way for moving ICT into a position where I've got to be careful what I say here, but into a position where business technology was really a partner at the table around where Auckland Transport was going, right? And I say that because I see a lot of organizations where ICT reports into the finance team, or reports in somewhere else and not sitting at the table. And I think this is changing a lot. But with Auckland Transport and the way that Roger really drove the technology story or function, he actually got ICT sitting at the table and actually driving where Auckland Transport was going as well, from a technology perspective, right? And that was something that I look back now and I say, Roger had a certain way about him and a certain way that he operated. But there were aspects of it that I was like, man, you don't see that in any other organization, right?
Yeah.
Where he could really get stuff going. Yeah.
On that point, like you've mentioned a couple of people, that kind of led and you've worked with. I think me as a Pacifica, and I guess you've probably been the only senior Pacifica that I've known in the IT realm. So I think for you, who have you had to kind of draw on for that kind of? I think for me, I look at you and go, oh, cool, there's some inspiration, someone I can identify with to kind of guide me and go, that's where I need to get to.
Yeah, I have thought about this a lot because I've had these conversations in the past, or I've had people mention that, right? And recently, probably over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, you do hear a lot of organizations now talk about diversity and inclusion, and Auckland Transport's, like doing that in spades. But KiwiRail is also looking at doing that. And I think these days, and I was thinking about it on the way here, there is no better time to get into IT in New Zealand.
Yeah.
There is no better time, right? But you have to work for it, right?
Yeah.
I think me doing the education stuff by myself and putting myself through, and it wasn't that long, right? But it was pretty expensive. But it didn't take me that long to get to a position where I'd done something that I could then go and say to the organization, well, I've done this training.
Yeah.
I can do this job, right? Just let me do it. I can do it. So you have to do a little bit to get you there.
Yeah.
But right now, with New Zealanders and organizations not being able to get staff, people are just like, I'm getting second level engineers that are applying for roles like architect roles and stuff like that because they can, right? And I'm like, I'm looking at your experience here, and you're saying you're an architect. You just come off the service desk, right? How does that relate? And they're saying, well, if you don't pay it, I've already got 2 offers at the moment. And I'm like, holy camole.
Yeah.
So I don't think. And the reason why I say this is I don't think it's a Pacifica thing, right? Because I think that the Pacifica thing is a bonus, right? Because as you build teams and if you just look at the culture of Pacifica. It's all about the village, right?
Yeah.
It's all about us coming together and looking after each other. It's that we've still got that village mentality, and I think that's a bonus, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what I look for. I look for, will you be part of my team? How will you fit into my team, right? Will you be there standing beside the rest of us when the shit hits the fan? And a lot of that happens in IT, right?
Yeah.
We don't always get it right, but when we get it wrong, man, things happen.
You know about it.
That's right. You want to look across the table at 3:00 in the morning and see your mates sitting there going, "Yep, cool, we got this.
Yeah.
We'll sort it out." So I think there is no better time to get into IT. Organizations will just lap you up.
Yeah.
But you have to put in a little bit of work, right?
Yeah,
you have to be able to go in and say, hey, look, I've done some of the study, or I've done an internship at this organization in IT and that sort of stuff. Yeah. And they'll take you, man. They'll take you.
That's interesting insight, how you talk about, these guys coming, second level and trying to go for these higher roles. What does the landscape look like though? Like, how many Pacifica or Māori applications do you actually get?
None. Not many, right? I get a lot of Asian, Indian and Asian candidates coming through. I get a lot of people that have been in IT for a while. So, the Caucasian male that's been in there for a long time, knows their stuff, long in the tooth, but are thinking now, holy hell, look at all of this money being thrown around. I'll just start,
changing it up.
Changing it up and so forth. But,
senior consultant.
Yeah, exactly. Senior consultant. But not many Pacifica at all. I think, I've seen a few come out of grad programs.
Yeah.
And so when I was at Auckland Transport, one of the things that I was very conscious of was identifying the Pacifica students coming out and going, cool, we need to make sure that we give these guys a go, right?
Yeah.
And so when we were going through, and it was a long period of putting the students or the candidates through simulations and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But my eye was always towards the, hey, what's the sister doing over there? What's the brother doing over there? And you can tell that they've gone through that sort of higher education that I didn't go through. And so they come out of that with, being very articulate, being very conscious of how they collaborate with others and all that sort of stuff, right? So they are equal, right? There is nothing holding them back at all. So I think, we just need to get more through that, get them through that system to get to that position where they are competing on a level playing field.
And I think that's one of the struggles that I guess the purpose of this is trying to get that out there, because to me it just feels like it's something. It just doesn't feel relevant to our people, or it just doesn't seem to be a drive. Like the numbers are astounding when you look at 2019 survey, 114,000 people in IT, only 2.8% PI. And
I think it's that sort of gateway, right? It's the how do we get them at an early enough age that they don't get discouraged later on in life to go, oh, that's too hard. How do you get them in an early age that they play with the computers and all that sort of stuff, just like the other privileged white kids were able to do at the same age, right? Yeah. They had the computer, they had the ability to break it and refix it and do stuff and ask dad for some money so that he could buy another hard drive and all that sort of stuff. The island kid broke it, he got a slap.
Yeah. And it was over.
That's it, get on it. So it was that the ability to do that just put them on a different, so that they got a little bit older. They started playing with their other friends that had computers. They built little LANs. They played their little games and stuff like that. Whereas the Pacific Islander kids didn't have that, right? So their paths, when they got to the same sort of age where they were looking at IT, they were like, too hard. Well, I'll go and try something else, right?
Yeah.
So I think we need to look at how do we make it easier, and it is getting easier. I think for the kids to get into IT, but I think IT is also getting easier for everyone else to get into as well. Yeah, right. It's not sort of that elite sort of shit, you work in computers. Wow, you must be brainy. Exactly. It's not like that anymore, right?
And that's the struggle. Like, I think one of my things I wanted to touch on was barriers to entry, whereas I listen to your story and think there's little to none.
That's right.
You came from something not even IT. Right. You didn't study IT. You kind of
I didn't study IT. I had a little bit. I mean, like most kids, I suppose. I had a little bit of healthy interest in computers. Yeah. I wanted to play games on it, but I couldn't afford. Mum couldn't afford to get any games for it. So I had, a green screen. I used to type some stuff in there. I used to go onto boards. I think it was back then, like forum boards, which was like the internet back then.
Yeah.
But you needed to know what you were doing back then to do that, and I wasn't very good. But so there was some interest there. I think a lot of my interest and a lot of what got me into computers was using computers at work and doing my export air freight. Yeah. And out of necessity, I sort of taught myself how to do some small development or macros on my PC that would allow me to get a order from a customer about what he wanted to send overseas, and I could go like F3, and it would fill out
Yeah.
the waybill, right? And the guys beside me were like, whoa, hold on, what'd you do there? And I was like, oh, well, I found this way that you could build a macro that if you pressed F3, it would go, put in the customer's details here, then it would tab 3 times, and it would put in the rate, and all of that sort of stuff. Right? I think it was called Reflections 3 or something or rather. So I think I had a curious part,
especially just I think that magic that you can other workers looking and go, oh, how'd you do that? And it's like tools that were all available to you.
Yeah, exactly. It was it was stuff that we weren't taught, but I found by just playing with it, right? And I think that's that. Back if I was much younger, and I had the ability and the tools and the stuff to play with, I think I would have been far more nerdier. You know what I mean? Because I would have gotten into it earlier. Right?
And really been
But again, it's the interest, right? Like you say, right? What's the barriers to our kids getting into IT? And I think these days, right, it's you go into schools now in South Auckland and everyone's got a computer and all that sort of stuff, right?
And so a lot of those barriers are lessening. And I think it's just how do we start the conversations earlier, like you're saying, and getting it in the right places.
I think so. So I think in terms of being a senior manager and that sort of stuff, what got me to those positions, because again, I didn't go through Harvard Business School or anything like that, or some massive university or anything like that around business education or anything like that. I think the way that I got to these positions were building those relationships, being consistent, making sure that when I said I would do something, I did it. And that, that in itself, many late nights. You know what IT is, right? When the shit hits the fan, I didn't want to be the one that says, oh, well, my shift's finished. Right? I'm just going home. I was like, man, I roll my sleeves up. I'll do whatever it takes to get the job done.
There's no recipe.
Unfortunately, there's no. Well, I think the recipe is be yourself. You've got to be yourself. You've got to embrace your heritage. And I do admit that at times in my career, I was embarrassed of my surname, right? Because Mr. Smith and Fraser Thomas and blah blah blah, Sam Tuineau, and they couldn't even pronounce it right? So it was like, oh shit, But I think it was just staying true to myself, the heritage and my upbringing around. Being respectful, being honest, don't lie, respect your elders, all of that sort of stuff, and hard work, right? You can't get to a certain position by just fluking it all the time. You've got to put in the hard yards to get there.
Well, with newer technologies coming out, I think like out in general around crypto and stuff like that, do you kind of follow any of that stuff around?
Yeah, again, like I'm not the smartest guy in the room, right? But I do reach out and I do try to, like I said earlier, go to the forums when they do talk about, what do you call it? Crypto, Bitcoin. They talk about some of those emerging technologies where I understand that people are doing smart things with. I understand that at some point our organization is going to have to start using it, or they'll just get left behind, or they'll get dragged into it. Kicking and screaming, and that's not the best way to do it, right? Someone will say, well, I'm not going to deal with you unless you're using this technology, and then we'll find ourselves scrambling, implementing it somehow to make sure that we don't lose the customer or that we can gain another customer and so forth. So I am conscious that emerging technology is something that I need to embrace, and I need our organization ICT to embrace. So One of the things that I'm doing at KiwiRail is looking at building up an innovation hub within ICT, and that's not the easiest thing to do, because people go, oh, what, you want how much to do what? What's the outcome of that? And I'm trying to say, well, the outcome of that is to be ready when these emerging technologies become mainstream.
So it's starting to get the conversation
That's
started.
right, get it going,
right
and we
people
understand how within our environment this emerging technology is going to work, right? Because we've tried it, and we've understood how machine learning needs curated data from here and from SAP and from Maximo and all that sort of stuff. So I'm curious enough to sit down with smart people and to get them to try and explain it to me in simpleton terms, right? And I do find myself sometimes faking it until you make it. Yeah, I understand. Oh, yeah.
That's the
until
smoke and
they've
mirrors
talked
of
enough
IT.
times that you've joined the dots together, and you're like, yeah, I get it now. You're right. And other times just going, oh man, I just don't understand that. Right? Can you just dumb it down for me? Right? Just let me draw it up on the board, right? And you would have seen me in the past drawing on the board. I love my whiteboards. I'm a very visual person. I get up and I draw it and I say, is that what you're talking about? No, not quite. Okay, how about this? How about that? How about that? Because it helps me as well.
Yeah. And I've seen you do that in the industry, and I think, being prepared, I guess, with what's happening in the industry and how it would affect the way you work. In terms of, I guess, how you see it affecting the real world, like I guess your everyday life, things how Facebook have kind of transformed, and now the changes with, Reserve Bank starting to talk about looking at cryptocurrencies. Like, do you kind of engage in any of that and kind of thinking, how do you navigate the changes around that?
Yes and no. I think from a personal perspective, I do look at crypto, and I remember the times back at KiwiRail, some 13 years ago or something or rather, when some of those smart guys that were working in our organisation or working for me were looking at mining, and looking at crypto, and that was when it was like $68, a Bitcoin, that sort of stuff, right? And back then I was sort of interested, but I didn't fully understand it. They bloody understood it. But if I look at how I was back then and what I was doing back then, and what was happening in Bitcoin, and then I look at what I'm doing now, and I have a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin's gone gangbusters, right? It's just gone through the roof. And back then it was an emerging technology. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I look at myself now and I go, well, really, I'm still doing the same sort of thing that I was doing back then. That emerging technology back then it's starting to make a big difference. Well, it's massive in terms of its cost or its price. It is starting to change the way that that Reserve Banks and so forth are looking at them. Right, they're either trying to control it or they're trying to compete against it and that sort of stuff. So I can see it changing in that respect. But from a day-to-day perspective, I'm still doing what I did back then. I'm still looking at building my teams. So emerging technologies will come and go. They'll come. They'll make huge changes like social media and so forth. And it's like the frog in the pot, right? When you're in it, you don't understand that it's getting hot around you. So you just go with the flow, and you make small changes as you go. Like at some point, I'm going to get a bank card that's only going to be for crypto. You know what I mean? And I'll be like, oh, okay, so I'm not using a Visa card anymore. I'm using a crypto card now. But I suppose if you were 13 years back then, and then you disappeared to the moon, and then you come back 13 years later, the change is like, holy shit, what the hell's going on here? What's this Facebook stuff, right? What's Instagram? What's Snapchat? What's blah, 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 blah? So if you remove yourself and then you come back, it is a massive change. But if you're in it, and it's changing around you, and you're just getting used to it, life just carries on, right? The emerging technologies are going to come.
Very good way of looking at it.
You know, AI. You know, we talk about AI, but AI has been happening since Facebook came out, right? And Instagram and all that sort of stuff. It's happening around us.
Yeah.
You're just part of, you're on the ride, right? You're on the ride. Things will start to get, change. Tesla, you'll start seeing more and more of their cars on the road.
Exactly.
Their technologies will start changing where now you can take a sleep in it and it'll drive you home, after a night on the pub. So it's I suppose the world will change around you, and you'll get dragged into it.
Yeah.
You can try and stay away as long as you can, but at some point, when they say, look, you can't use cash anymore, you have to use a card. We don't take cash over the counter. It's like, whoa, now I'm forced into using a card.
So what's next for Sam?
Oh, good point. What's next for Sam?
And your story sounds like it's only just starting. It's like as much as it's gone on, it's like feels
what's
like
next for Sam? Look, I am conflicted by taking the next role as a CIO. I think if you look at career projection, I think the CIO is the next role. And what does that mean for me? That means a much greater influence around what technology can do for an organization, and that's next level, right? So that's what I'm trying to do in my existing role at KiwiRail. Is I'm trying to make ICT like Auckland Transport be at the table, really driving where KiwiRail is going, right? And if you have a look at KiwiRail, it's got massive asset base, right? It's big train mechanical stuff that's rolling along, but there is so much technology that's coming into that environment, and I'm very excited about that. But I also think that there is so much more technology can do for KiwiRail.
To lead rather than just
that's
to
right. To be a thought leader, to be really pushing KiwiRail to a position where it's like, wow, look at where we've come from, and look at us now. So I think that's what I'm trying to do now, and I think the CIO role, whether it be at KiwiRail or whether it be at another organization, is really bringing technology as a thought leader, as a sort of pinnacle of change within an organization, right? I don't see any organization these days that's not changing or transforming without technology. You've got your people there. You can't do it without people, but I think you would struggle to do it without technology. So I think technology needs to be, if not at the table, leading the table.
How hard is it to have that kind of conversation with an organization that's so manual for so many years?
Yeah, very hard, right? Very hard, because we've got engineers that built their careers and that's what they know. And when you try and have that technology discussion from an IT perspective with them, they're like, what do you know about train control? What do you know about locomotives and all that sort of stuff?
And I guess for those engineers, because it's been their bread, I think when you kind of come to those gathering business requirements, when you say, how do you do that?
Yeah,
that's my dark art. Leave me alone.
That's right. Well, I think there is more than ever now. There is a merging of operational technology and IT. Right, the two are coming together. And I think there is also the separation of the two as well. So it's a sort of contradiction in terms there. But the reason why I say that is cybersecurity is massive, right? In terms of ensuring that we're not getting DHB'd or I shouldn't have said DHB. We're not getting ransomware or hacked or anything like that.
How hard is that? Like, have you guys got a big presence around security at the moment?
Yeah, sorry, I can't disclose
Oh,
that.
yeah, I was going to say. Yeah, they got heaps.
Look,
They got heaps.
you've got to be careful what you say. Either
Yeah,
way you
yeah.
go, there's going to be someone listening that's going to go, oh, you think you're good.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
well, we'll show you.
Let's try that on.
Look, the reason why I was talking about OT and IT is that the operation and technology side of the organization that is using technology in the operational sense out in the field, they cannot carry on doing what they've been doing for the last 20 odd years. And predominantly it's because that world is being merged with how IT is, how IT does its work. And a good example of that is, we're now using the internet for communications. We're now using networks and smart networks and all that sort of stuff. And OT needs to use those same sort of networks.
Yeah.
But with that comes this risk of cybersecurity, right? So like I say, the two are coming together where OT is starting to use the IT components.
Yeah.
They also need to stay separate enough so that, IT that brings that sort of cyber risk doesn't impact the OT side of things, right? So there's this healthy tension between the two, and then security sitting over the top of it as well. In terms of KiwiRail and its security, no one in their right mind is going to go out there and go, yeah, man, we're secure as, no worries, man. We got all the firewalls in the world and, all of that sort of stuff. No one in their right mind is going to do that, because if you just look at organizations that are being data breached and ransomware and stuff like that, you go, and they spend millions and millions of dollars on their security, and little KiwiRail over here. We try to do the hygiene stuff well. We try to do all the backups and making sure that we've got the firewalls in place and patching everything. All the hygiene stuff that a good IT organization should be doing. And then also the education of our staff. Right?
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing, especially when you're saying these
Don't
people are
click
new.
on that link. and then we send them a link to say, oh, click on the link to go to this page.
Yeah, that risk of exactly what you just explained of changing the guard and trying to get into the space they need to be in.
Yeah.
But also teaching them how to, because that's the first thing. It's like, I know how to do emails now and I reply to everything.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Education is a big thing. I think organizations are a constant battle to keep their staff educated. And again, you look at KiwiRail with OT and going for the last over 150 odd years. We were very mechanical in terms of some of our areas, and you've got people, locomotive engineers and so forth out there that we're giving a lot of technology to, to make their job, more efficient and to, well-being and all that sort of stuff. But with that needs to come that education that, they pick up the iPad and they go, I can just go to the internet on here. Hey, it's like, mate. So it's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Or it's a never-ending battle, I suppose.
Yeah.
Not a battle, but a never-ending education thing that needs to happen.
Yeah.
So I think CIO, I suppose, if you look at the trajectory of my career, is probably the next step that I'll be looking to make.
Yeah.
But I think that is a next step up, and I think that is one where I need to be really putting myself out there, working with my peers in the industry, understanding what's happening out there, understanding what the challenges are. But other than that, if it's not in ICT, I would love to be on the farm. I'd love to have a farm of my own, and I know that's not easy work either. But I think one of the things that I wanted to do when I was a young boy was be a farmer, and work on the land. So.
Were you on a farm when you were over in Fiji? Like they have...
No, we weren't in the farm. We were in the city or just in the suburbs.
Okay.
But my dad, because he was an Anglican minister, every second Sunday would travel around Fiji. And go to certain spots around the countrysides, and one of the places we used to go to, the Anderson's farm, was I loved it, man. It was awesome. It was a dairy farm up the coast or inland a wee bit, and that's where my desire to be a farmer came from.
Okay,
right?
so it actually did come
Yeah.
from...
You know, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going to the cow shed and you know, in Fiji it was a bit cold, but it was probably around about 18 degrees in the morning at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, cold.
You know, and then I come here to New Zealand and they're getting up at 4 o'clock and it's like -5. I'm like, yeah, you can keep that. But I really loved my time in Fiji and on the farm.
The ministry, like, so is that something that carries on in the family? Is there like a
My
calling for
dad
any of you?
my dad would have loved for us, one of the boys, to become a minister or stay in the church.
Yeah.
But I think we were just a little bit more rebellious back then.
Yeah.
And by the age of, I think, about maybe 11 or 12, maybe, I started sort of rebelling and not wanting to go to church and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, unfortunately for Dad, it didn't go down that path.
All right. Hey, I usually finish with usually saying it's the first time I'm going to do this. We'll finish off with these quickfire. My little quickfire questions.
Oh, sweet.
Keep you on your toes. All right, they're a bit geeky, but they're not. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Favorite musician? Group?
Ben Harper.
Ooh, nice. Would you consider yourself a gamer or a noob?
Gamer.
Oh, game?
World of Tanks.
Oh, that's right. I don't remember you saying that. Favorite sports person?
Favorite sports person? That's a good question, actually. Favorite sports person? I'd have to say my brother, my younger brother.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good call. BK or Macca's?
Macca's.
Cat or dog person?
Dog.
Nice, yeah. Must be an island thing.
Yeah, you reckon? I've got a story. I don't know whether I should say. No, I won't say it. One of the things so I've eaten dog, and I've eaten cat, I've eaten bat, I've eaten mongoose, I've eaten a whole lot of stuff, and that's all from islands, right?
Yeah.
And I tell the story of Oscar, our dog in Tonga, when he got hit outside our house by a car. Yeah, we ate him.
Yeah, are you for real?
Oh, we did. We did.
Your family pet. How old were you?
Oh, hell, I would have been, I would have been young. I would have been very young.
So you remember the taste at all? Or any... Did you know it was Oscar at the time?
No, I don't think I realized it was Oscar. But I think as I got older, I think I put one and one together and came out with dog. I'm like, oh my God. Do you remember Oscar? I was like, oh.
And I thought he ran away.
Yeah, I thought he ran away.
Favorite island dish?
Oh, chop suey. Oh, polusami.
Oh,
yeah, man.
Do you cook?
No, I don't. I cook, but not island food.
Okay.
No.
Netflix or Disney Plus?
Netflix.
Cool, those are my 10 questions.
Awesome,
and this has been awesome.
Sweet.
Finally, just you shared on it a little already, but I think like, if anyone's out there listening, what's their first step? Like, to inspire them, if they're not already inspired listening to you.
Yeah. I suppose the inspiration, if it's around IT, if it's around getting into IT, then there are a lot of courses out there, right? I think talk to people like us, understand the difference between networks, software development, mobile development. Try to get an understanding of where you would like to work. When I started looking at technology or IT, that was the first question that I popped up with. Right, it was like, do I want to do networking? Do I want to do software development, or do I want to do infrastructure stuff? And that's where I went. I said, when I talked to a few people, they were like, "Oh, you're networking, mate. They're geeks, man. They sit in a room and they just, do this sort of stuff here." And so I was like, "Oh, yeah. How about software development?" They're worse, mate. They're worse, So I went for more infrastructure, and that's where I sort of landed. Right, and that was just because it sounded like infrastructure was more people thing, because you had to look after desktop, and desktop mean you had to talk to the person at the other end of the desktop, right? So that was more a people thing. So I think the first thing is just talk to someone, right? If you're in IT, just go, hey, how do you get in? What did you do? Where did you come from? That sort of stuff. Just like what we're doing now. Get a sense of where you think you would like to work. And then find the courses. There are so many. The one thing that you'll find on the internet is education, right? YouTube. There are so many things out there now that you could train yourself in anything, man, in anything. The thing that people will look for, though, is either experience or certification. Yeah. So you've got to get one of those two. And then when you get that, just keep pushing. The organizations that you work for, will you put me through training? I'd love to do some training. Always be open to opportunity. Who wants to do the backups tonight? Yep, I'll do it. Who wants to do? Yep, I'll do it. Put your hand up, man. Just keep putting your hand up. And then you'll find yourself in a position where you're like, man, I've learned so much, right? What's the next thing? Stay as a geek or a gamer. Even these days, being a gamer, right? You see things, people earning, $3 million being a gamer. It's like, or being
building your own game
influencer.
On Roblox. Like
or being an influencer on Instagram or that sort of stuff, right? So, really, what do you want to do? I think this day and age, like I said earlier, computers the entry levels come down. It's not one of these things that everyone goes, wow, that's just so hard to get into. It's easy to get into, but is it what you want to get into? Yeah.
Sam, it's been a pleasure. Where can people find you? I tried stalking you to find some more details, but all I could find you was on LinkedIn, man.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Facebook man. I've got a Facebook account out there, but I the last time I looked at it was probably 4 or 5 years ago.
It's like a catfish Facebook page. It's like one photo.
yeah, exactly. LinkedIn is probably the best way of getting hold of me. One thing I do on LinkedIn is anyone that requests access or requests connections, I just accept it. I know there's probably a security thing around that now, because I've got people that are coming from all over the world, and I'm like, accept. But yeah, there's a lot of connections on LinkedIn of people going, hey, we just want to reach out and have a coffee and that sort of stuff. So. If you don't accept, like I said earlier, there's an opportunity, put your hand up, man.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure, Sam. Thank you so much.
Thanks, brother. Awesome.
That's all right, man. That's
all good.
Yeah, that's how we do it. Yeah.
Oh, awesome, man.
Thanks for reaching out, man.
Yeah, no worries, man. I was going through my LinkedIn and I was like, oh, man, I got to get back.